Is it his yard sale, or is
It's
it,
a multi-family yard sale.
are all the families on their own property, or are they?
No, it's a multi-family yard sale on his property.
Is he renting space to them?
No.
He's just giving them space.
Yeah.
So it's not a flea market.
It's not a flea market.
It's just a bunch of friends getting together to have.
That's what it is. I know the guy personally.
And signage. I noticed that there's. I don't
We've
know.
been through this almost every year, and every year it's determined that it's a few people who complain, and their complaints generally are with traffic, which goes to the police department and not the planning board or the selectmen.
So there is adequate off-street parking
No,
and safe ingress and egress.
Adequate, I mean,
Nope.
depends. If he's got good stuff, there's a lot of cars there.
So, but from a zoning perspective,
It's street parking.
if
It's-
I read our zoning, it says that for a home occupation, you have to have safe ingress and egress. You have to have adequate off-street parking. It doesn't say that off-street parking has to be used.
I don't agree with that at all.
But that's
But
not a yard.
that's-
That's not
It's not-
addressing
it's not
a yard sale.
occupation.
I understand.
Yeah,
I'm just.
that would fall in the prevail of a home business to me, so.
Isn't a yard sale a
It's,
home occupation?
No.
it's not an occupation, it's not like a full-time job they can.
If he did it every week, I would consider that
would be
possible.
okay, yeah.
So you're saying you can't do it every week?
No, I would consider it being called something different than a yard sale. I would consider a flea market or a junk sale. I don't think you can have a yard sale every single week at one place and it becomes a business then. I don't know, there's some weird terminology.
But my point is that we allow businesses. And so, I mean, maybe we wouldn't want a yard sale at some place at that scale every week, maybe. But maybe that's okay. So where in our zone, so I don't want to like sound like a real weirdo or anything like that, but where in our zone does it allow for yard sales? I think a reasonable interpretation is that you can do stuff like that, but
It doesn't disallow it.
Well, if it's not allowed,
where in our
it's-
zoning does it say you can't have a yard sale?
well, our zoning says that if it's not explicitly allowed, it's disallowed, right? It says that a couple of different places in there.
Yeah, and
Right.
that's
And so I'm not trying to be hard ass. I think yard sales are a good thing for everybody involved, right? But
Okay.
so I'm not trying to. But I would look in our zoning and say if I had to find a place for a yard sale, I'd say it's a home occupation of some kind, right? Those are allowed, right? I'm not sure where else you put it, what other category you put it in to allow it.
So if somebody wants to get rid of some junk and they have a yard sale, that's an occupation?
I don't know how else to cover it in the zoning in terms of.
Wait a minute.
I don't think it should be covered.
I don't think it's.
It's a yard sale. Happens twice a year. Was this the first year they did it?
No,
Anybody ever get hurt?
no,
Anybody have fun over there?
yeah.
Oh, I don't know,
It gets a
it
little tight
depends.
once in a while, but,
It's a yard sale.
Well, it's kind of like
I
the
don't know what I'm
tobacco
talking about.
police. We'll just start banning yard sales. No more yard sales in Brookfield because they're not, because
There
what
are-
isn't approved. Incidentally,
there are
have a lemonade stand.
There are communities in this country that don't allow yard sales, right? Their zoning does not allow yard sales.
yeah, I know that.
I think ours should, but
You know what
and I think it does.
You know, that bit about the whatever isn't allowed is disallowed, that came into being for one reason only, and it was my boat storage. That brought that ordinance into being. Ron Murray pushed it through, and he pushed it at the behest of 7 people that live in this town. They have their names, the meetings that they asked him to do it. I was present. And that particular...
I was an alternate on the board at the time.
Yeah, and at that particular thing has always been something that I felt should never be in the zoning ordinance anyway, because it's eminently challengeable in court. I was going to come in here and challenge it with my attorney, and I decided not to spend the $2,000. But that whole thing, he said, is eminently challengeable because it doesn't make good legal sense. Whatever is disallowed or is not allowed is
That is
disallowed.
not permitted as, how was it?
Yeah.
It
It's
says,
not addressed.
It's prohibited.
yeah,
He
but
says,
It's permissive zoning, and almost
and he said,
almost every single zoning ordinance in the country is permissive zoning, just like ours. And-
however, it's eminently challengeable.
anything's challengeable. He wants to make $2,000. Of course he's going to tell you that. You know, I mean,
No, but Paul's got $150 million in the bank. He doesn't need my $200. When he sat here for me that night, he charged me $500 for 12 hours work. It's not a money thing with him.
I understand. I'm just saying, I mean, lawyers think everything's challengeable, and it is, right? That's why we have a court system.
Well, I agree. That's true. Ed,
Actually, James
Jim.
first.
Getting that picky on what somebody can do on their own property is falling into the purview of disallowing children from selling lemonades or disallowing Girl Scouts to go around and sell cookies door to door. I think that's getting a little petty. I think it's more of a situation for the police to make sure that there's safe passage for traffic. And I think they put up plenty of signs to let people know that it's there, and you have plenty of advanced.
Put up signs all the way from 16 all the way to Cedar,
Yes.
Governor's
I think
Road,
they're doing
actually.
everything they can with their location. They just happen to not be in the greatest of locations.
They go to great lengths to
They
do
do.
that, and they don't
They
have
do.
to.
No.
They're
They
being
do
good
it just
neighbors.
to make sure
They're
people.
being
are
good
safe.
neighbors and they're having fun.
Yes.
And I hate to be idealistic about the situation, but I'm tired of everybody running to regulations before we talk to each other as neighbors.
Thank
That
you.
has to happen, because it's just got to stop with this, let's run to regulate and make laws
Well, the
every
interesting
time we
thing
need
is
to
that
discuss things.
the people all around him like it. The people next to him set up a hot dog stand. The Lavenders across the street use that as an excuse to set up their tag sale every year because the volume of traffic is incredible. So they do
Is
it.
that hot dog stand in Wakefield?
Pardon me?
The hot dog stands in
It's
Wakefield.
in Wakefield.
Yeah. But
Delete
still,
totally illegal.
Delete the hot dog.
but it's for the day, and they technically need a vendor's permit from the state of New Hampshire to do that.
It's
But
none of our business.
nonetheless, the people that are complaining don't live in that vicinity. They probably make a trip by
Twice a
one.
day, that's all.
But an interesting
That's
note,
why
the
they're
people who
complaining.
complain visit the yard sale.
So maybe we're.
Hypocrisy at its best.
It's true.
Yankees complain about everything.
Well, anyway, I just don't want to go there. Leave it alone. But if anybody wants to go there, they can make a motion. Yes.
I don't want to make a motion, but I would like to make a comment. I think that I firmly believe that if we're going to have zoning, we should pay attention to it, and and if the zoning doesn't fit the way we want to live, we should change it.
We should do away with it.
Or do away with it, right? I mean, that's a legit. I mean, but if we're going to have zoning, and we're going to have a zoning ordinance, we should make sure that that zoning ordinance is something we want to enforce the way it's written. And if we don't want to enforce it the way it's written, we should change it.
Right?
And we can change it every year, and as much or as little as we want. We could probably even get rid of it. I'm sure that I haven't read the RSAs, but I mean, the town can vote it in. I'm sure the town can vote it out. I'm not proposing that, but I think that we should. Last year. I did propose some changes to the wording around home occupation, which would have made it so basically any kind of business you can run it as long as it's small enough scale that it doesn't cause problems, right? And I think if we had that, it would be clear that anything that you're doing that's going to make money can be classified as a business, and you're allowed to do it. I think that our home occupation, whether it's once a year or every day, I think it can still be a home occupation. I think that if you don't want to call a yard sale home occupation, I think you ought to think hard about where our zoning allows you to do that. There's lots of zoning ordinances that don't allow yard sales. They explicitly don't allow yard sales. They explicitly don't allow lemonade stands or hot dog stands. I don't think we want to live that way here. I don't think we should live that way here. But the zoning is the law of the land. And we've got our enforcement guy here, and Eddie fortunately is a reasonable guy. But I think that if, there's no reason for us to not make the zoning ordinance be the way we want to live.
We want to live. It's my understanding that we want to let people have yard sales.
I don't disagree.
Well, then why even put the subject into the zoning ordinance saying, yes, yard sales are okay? Then should we define how many days they're acceptable, or whether they can do it twice a year, or any? Once we get into that, now we're making a bunch of laws. In this little town, that guy does it twice a year. He has no desire to do it 5 times a year. I know him, twice a year is about all he can handle. And even if you put it in zoning, I believe firmly that the people that complain about it would complain about it anyway, about the traffic and the problems, et cetera, et cetera. I just don't see any reason to address, we might as well address every single thing on the planet that's addressable in our ordinance if we're going to go into tag sales. That's how I feel. Now, I agree with you to a point, but not on that particular item because I think it's too small an item to cater to 2 people that have complained every year about that tag sale for 5 years. And they're the only people that complain.
My only point is that there's no reason why, if we as a town want to be able to do that kind of thing, that it's not eminently clear to everybody that they're allowed to do it. Why is it that every year people feel like they can stand up and complain? I mean, it seems like at some point you should be able to say, look, our zoning allows it. End of story. If you don't like it, propose a change to the zoning.
I would propose a change to the zoning then. I probably could make a proposal to remove the language if it's not permitted, or whatever that is. I could see that disappear from zoning. It wouldn't break my heart one bit. If it's not permitted, it's prohibited. I don't care for that because then you have to legally, that's where it's challengeable. You have to list every single possible permission of anything or everything else is, that's how that reads. That's why it is eminently challengeable.
Or you permit broadly. That's my approach would be permit broadly. Anyway, there's other people on top.
Anyway, go ahead.
It was one thing, but it just became 2. I totally disagree with that zoning. If it's not permitted, it's prohibited. I was sitting at the time that was worded, brought up, discussed, and changed. I don't believe it was properly done in the first place because that's a major change. And it was put through, it was shuffled through the meeting as just some minor housekeeping when it literally changed everything.
Yep.
I would, my first comment would be to investigate how the procedure was done to pass that wording. Yeah, we voted on it as a whole, but there were no proper hearings or anything.
There was no public hearing?
Nothing. So, if that's what you want to do with that, I would be behind you 100%.
I'd be behind you 100% too.
The real reason I raised my hand is because I want to change the subject from yard sales. But I want to stay with Rob's concern about if we're going to have zoning, let's have zoning to enforce the zoning. So I would suggest that we work, since maybe the upcoming stuff after we get through the SRPC is only going to be CIP, that let's put some zoning forth, a right to farm issue, that the right for individuals in this town to farm, we need to word it, we need some zoning that says we have a right to farm and produce our own food, because I don't know how many people realize it or not, but it's coming at us at the opposite,
yes, it is,
distasteful way from a higher entity, government, and it's not good. So the more we can do now at our level, hopefully it'll become infectious and spread. So I think if the board's up to it, we should look into some clear wording. It's called the right to farm.
Why don't you write something up and submit it to the board?
I'll try.
If that's a motion, you got to do it.
You're a smart guy, you're farming.
There's got to be some stuff already.
Do you think that our zoning isn't clear that you're allowed to farm?
It's not very specific. See, what I remember our issue was the definition of a farm.
Mm-hmm.
And in the good old days, you could look back and you could reason, because there's a lot of intent. What's the spirit of stuff? Worked well when you would say, well, you know, everybody here was a farmer 150 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at our zoning is agricultural residential. It's always been agricultural first, with a second of residential. And it's slowly throughout New Hampshire, and the towns are flipping it this way, and then they're going to remove it.
Can I inject something?
Yep.
Congress has just passed a little law that, and I don't know if it's gone through both the House and the Senate, but it absolutely prohibits people below the age of 21 from working on a farm.
Yeah, Congress didn't do that.
It didn't pass.
Okay, it didn't
I
pass.
thought that was I thought there was a regulation, not a bill.
Yeah, it was going through OSHA.
Yeah, OSHA.
Yeah,
it was not going through the legislative process, was my understanding.
And it also has something about family members were.
Even family farms.
Yeah, family
Until you were
farms.
18.
You couldn't have your
And I have to
kids
tell
out driving
you,
a tractor.
I have to tell you very clearly and most assuredly, that is straight out of the Agenda 21.
Yeah, no
stuff.
matter how you look at it,
It's a global thing.
no matter how you look at it, it's
It is.
It's
That's
an agenda.
where it came from.
It's an agenda.
They want it.
Oh,
No, go ahead. I can start.
Well, one comment on, as far as people complaining, I deal with the public on a daily basis. There's no amount of signage, there's no amount of regulation, there's no amount of precaution or attempts that anybody can make that will make 100% of the people be happy with everything. It's not gonna happen. I think those people are going way beyond what somebody would reasonably expect as far as making sure the public is safe and that they're operating in a safe manner. They do tell people to pull their cars over further if they see that there's a hazard. I think they should be basically left alone. As far as the comments on the yard sale, I got a little bit off track. So
Just to be clear, I was not. I was
back to the odds.
just to be clear, I was not saying that they should not be allowed to do what they're doing. I was not implying that at all. I was just bringing up that this is a topic that has been brought up in town.
yeah, we get comments all the time.
But I was not advocating for or against any particular thing that was happening there.
Well, can I respond to that?
Mr. Chairman, are we on new business or are we on member comments?
This is new business still. We'll go to member comments very shortly, though. We're not going to stay much longer. I think what you're saying has some merit to the point of view. However, I think there are two approaches to that particular thing. One of the approaches is to say that tag sales are permitted in town. The other approach is to do some investigating, as Eddie had recommended a few minutes ago, which I'm about to do, because I feel very strongly about that particular item, and see if that was put into zoning in a proper way. If it wasn't put in a proper way, it's very easy to throw it out. It may be very easy to throw it out anyway. That's the other approach. I don't believe in that. If it's not permitted, it's prohibited. I don't believe in that. I'm sorry, I don't accept it. I think but that doesn't mean I have to say so. The whole board has to say so on those things. Everybody votes. But I would like to look at it. And that's another approach to this. If it isn't permitted, but the tag sale isn't prohibited. So therefore, we don't have to address the issue at all.
If it's not prohibited, it's permitted.
Yes.
So our zoning, that would, so.
That sounds good.
So I'm not opposed to the idea of going there, but I don't think you'd have to rewrite much of our zoning. Certainly, because most of our zoning is written in the permissive style. It tells in RA1 you're permitted to do this. Your primary uses are agricultural and residential. Secondary uses are home occupations and so on. Right, it's things you're permitted to do.
Our zoning has always been that since 1955.
Right.
However, the words "if it isn't permitted, it is prohibited" encompasses all acts that are done in the town. Whereas if that's not put in there, then each particular item has to be individually challenged by the town, not by the citizen. If it's put in there, then the citizen must challenge the town. It becomes, the shoe goes on the other foot legally, which is the problem with that particular onerous piece of verbiage. It takes the shoe off the foot of the person, or off the foot of the town, of proving that the person's doing something wrong. Now the person has to prove they're doing something right. That's how that works. That's why I don't particularly care for that.
I understand. My point was that it's not, the problem that you're pointing out is not, the problem you're pointing out is permissive zoning, and it's not restricted to that one clause. that everyone finds so objectionable. The whole thing is written in that style, which makes it so that if you...
All zoning is. Everywhere.
No. Permissive zoning is. And permissive zoning has the implied thing that you've got, or either explicitly or implicitly, that you've got, if it's not permitted, it's prohibited. That's part of the style of permissive zoning. If you want to write it as prohibitive zoning, you write the zoning in completely opposite direction, right? The kinds of things you're not allowed to do. And so...
But that's in here.
Very little of ours...
Quite a lot of it. You can only have so many pigs. You're not allowed to have 11 or 12, 13. There's a ton of stuff in there.
There's only about 7 things in there that you're not allowed to do.
Oh, there's quite a few. And encompassing all of those are commercial enterprises that are not considered home-based businesses. That's inherent. I mean, there is a legal argument here, is my point.
And if the 7 things...
Well, we've had zoning since '67, I think, in Brookfield. And the permissive zoning statement that we're talking about was passed about 9 years ago.
9 years ago.
Maybe 10.
Yeah, about
I
9.
can't remember exactly. So, however the style it was written or whatnot, that statement was inserted very shortly ago.
Right, but if you do some research on, if you do some reading on styles of zoning, look up permissive zoning, go Google it, and you know, I'd be willing to bet, I'm not a lawyer, but I'd be willing to bet that just by striking that from our zoning probably changes nothing.
Yes, it does.
The courts would interpret our zoning as being slightly flawed by not having that statement explicitly, but the style of our zoning is clearly permissive zoning.
The major change lies in the fact that the burden of proof lies on the town versus the individual. In other words, the individual has to bring suit against the town and incur all the court costs thereof. Whereas if the town has to bring a suit against the individual, the town incurs the court costs. And of course, court costs can be deferred or transferred by the judge's decree or whatever. But that's the major hurdle there that I don't like. So everything is permissive or prohibitive. In all zoning, there's both. But the fact where the legal shoe sits is what I don't care for. In effect, they take it away from the citizen's right to pursue this simply because it's not cost effective for him to do it. He can't afford to over minor issues, and I think that sucks. Pardon me. Didn't mean to be vulgar. But anyway, okay. Anybody else, Jim, then let's move on.
There's one more thing I think we've hit on a possible future project for the planning board is to address that specific issue, because where we can bring it out in front of the public and show what was done previously to install that verbiage. Now we can bring out, to the public exactly what we should do and make sure it's in the public eye.
Yeah.
And one final comment.
Okay.
I don't disagree with what Jim just said. However, I think that if whatever style of zoning we end up with, whether it's permissive, which we've got now, or prohibitive, I think we can make it work for us and have it be clear and something that we want to enforce to the letter of the zoning. I personally think that we should have very permissive zoning.
We don't enforce anything.
Well, we ought to.
Wait a minute, I'll lose my job.
Yeah. We need to keep Eddie's business here.
Oh, that one.
That
Select one.
I'll lose one of my jobs.
Oh, no. Sorry.
Anyway,
Okay, member
I don't see any member comments other than this stuff
Yeah.
that we've been, Rick.
First one, if the chairman would consider on the agenda, put times in for these things. Let's put a schedule on these. Is that inappropriate?
Time limit, you mean?
Yeah, and have a clock keeper, and when we're going down these things, if we run over, stop it, we go on to the next thing. We'll have to have continuation.
Does the chairman have the right to override the clock?
Yeah,
Okay.
at the expense of something down the line.
Yeah, it's always, well,
How long is it? What is it?
9 o'clock, where we have to vote to go beyond 9 to start with.
Okay.
So there is an automatic time limit on our meeting anyway.
Okay.
So we're about to
Some
adjourn
of
half an
these
hour early.
things just start rolling off, and
Yeah,
we could be more productive with our time. We start by putting time limit on each one of these blocks.
Well, then,
Not a time limit,
here's a way to,
a time schedule.
here's a way to do that. Somebody make a motion at the beginning of each category saying, I propose we only spend 20 minutes on this item.
That's the way to do it.
Well, it keeps us from getting into more regulations, and I
Yeah,
think that's...
okay, that's satisfactory. Second member comment, I look around this room, we're the only ones here. I come to the agriculture meeting on the first Monday of the month, I sit here by myself and talk to Virginia. It's, and I don't even know who that fellow was, registered his car or something tonight. He said, you know, I'm glad I don't have to go to any of these meetings. I could if I want to, but screw that, or whatever he said. We gotta get people here. I mean, we should probably ask a couple of people, invite them down here.
This business might do that.
Well, we're kind of short on alternates right now.
I
We
mean,
are. I've asked...
By getting a couple of, some more public in here, you might get interested to get some alternates.
I've asked
They don't even know we're
many
here.
people to take that job on.
You know, don't ask them to take jobs in alternate, just tell them to come down here and listen for a couple hours.
Yeah.
So, that's a free coffee
We
or
got
something,
it.
maybe I'll get some of them.
Ed?
There are people watching, they're just not here, because the Facebook page, if you join it, is pretty active. And there are people in town that are on the Facebook page that watch these meetings, so people are watching.
Interesting.
Well, that's
A
good.
lot of them can't get here because of
Well, you
work.
figure the dynamics of this town,
Well, that's it.
20 years ago, there was a lot more retired people in town than there are now. There's a lot of working people in town.
Yeah,
And they're spending their time working, and
I think I'm looking at the whole room for it, huh?
except for Gary here, he's pretty wealthy.
Who? Me?
Wealthy slacker.
He's a 1%.
Yeah, he's a 1%. He's a 1%er of Brookfield.
I got a goose that lays golden eggs.
I know, that's what I'm talking about.
I got a big pile of them.
And also Poland, for some reason, seems to be the largest out-of-country group that watches these meetings.
Really?
Really?
Our meeting?
Yeah, my stats show me what country people are coming from in to look at the pages.
Perestroika, you know, they just found their
We're an
freedom.
international hit.
No, it's because over in Europe, a lot of the old Eastern Bloc nations are very interested in how this works.
Emulating self-government, I'll
So
bet you.
stuff that happens here, you're affecting people across the
Self-government.
Good.
So you mean to tell me the whole world might find out what I paid my attorney for that?
If you told them yes.
I opened my big yap and my attorney said, please don't tell anybody, I only charge you that. God, if he sees this, he's gonna
Oh
shoot.
boy, he's gonna gaff you the next time.
Well, he kinda did us a favor, you know.
Let's get some people here.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So speaking of alternates, I think we need to put whatever pressure you can put on the selectmen to either get here and or have an alternate here.
Yeah, I've been thinking of that, because Clifton isn't here tonight, and we really do need
He wants
to.
some long hours. His new job has been kind of
Yeah, I know, but then maybe somebody else should be the selectman's alternate if he's working hours. I mean, that's, you know, I understand, but,
Yeah, we all gotta do it sometimes.
yeah.
It's important.
Except for
that-
the 1%ers.
It's important,
I'll
it's,
ask.
it's important the selectmen are represented here and we can use their input, and either Clifton or another selectman or an alternate would be helpful.
When do they meet tomorrow night? They meet tomorrow night?
Yes.
Didn't they meet last Tuesday?
No, they meet the day after us.
They met last Tuesday too. But
Did they have supposed to?
their regular scheduled meetings tomorrow night.
Okay, I was thrown off by that.
Yeah.
Was that 5th Tuesday, or that was a special meeting? Or?
Special road committee meeting.
No, that's right, I did watch that.
And I missed it,
Yes, you did.
and I apologize for that. Well, I don't see any other business to do, and I say the meeting is now adjourned. Let's go.
Yeah.
So,
Are we supposed to vote to the meeting?
No, don't have to.
Chairman can adjourn.
Chairman can adjourn at any time, right in the middle of your sentence.
What was it, Monty Python?
George.
Actually, he used, what was it? Parrot.